now going to start the Gosho lecture on replies to Lord Nunjold.
Evening, everybody. This is the first time, I think, that Berkeley General Chapter has come together, isn't it?
Yes.
Congratulations. I was just thinking today that the three General Chapter names, to me, are so wonderful, because there's Westminster General Chapter, which is really founded on the history of England, and then there's Berkeley General Chapter, which is very much founded on the history of the Soka Gakkai because of its connections with Sensei, and then there's Horizon General Chapter, which is very much connected with the future. So it seems to me these are three great names. Many congratulations on yours, anyway. Okay, well, tonight we're going to do the first of the monthly Gosho lectures. I just want to explain first why we have said that our Shakubuku campaign, which, as you know, begins right now and is in two phases, from now until November, the end of November, and from February through to the end of April, why we must base this on the Gosho. And it's really because the spirit of Nichiren Daishonin lives in every single word of every one of all the hundreds of Goshos. So when you first read a Gosho, it's sometimes difficult to understand. It often doesn't seem to be particularly meaningful. But once you deeply consider it, especially combined with chanting, you begin to realize the incredible depth and the enormous amount that you can get out of every word. So you can read a Gosho this year, and you can get a lot out of it, and you can read the same Gosho in 6 months or a year's time and get all sorts of different things out of it, because you are making progress in your human revolution. Your understanding of Buddhism is deepening all the time. So the supply of wisdom and guidance from the Gosho is, I believe, absolutely inexhaustible. I think when we're 80, or when I'm 80, I can still read the same Gosho and get something new out of it. So every word breathes this spirit, which was Nichiren Daishonin's spirit. So if we're to truly understand Kosen Rufu, truly understand the spirit of our practice, truly understand why we must Shakubuku, and why we must chant Daimoku, and why we must do great Gonyos, we must understand the Gosho, because this gives the spirit on which it was founded. So when President Ikeda was conducting his fantastic campaign in the Osaka area of Japan, the greatest Shakubuku campaign I think that's ever been done, his program was entirely based on the Gosho. He used to go to bed after chanting for an hour or two, probably about 1 or 2 in the morning. And at 7 o'clock, all the senior leaders of that area were sitting ready for a Gosho lecture. And he gave them a Gosho lecture every morning of that campaign, before they went off to their day's work and their businesses. Then during the day, through the women, all the guidance that had come out of the Gosho was communicated to every district, every neighborhood, and every community, so that by the time the evening activities began, everyone was living fresh on the guidance of that day. So the spirit of Nichiren Daishonin was really in that campaign from beginning to end, the spirit of the Buddha. And as you may know, having read extracts from the Human Revolution, it was an unbelievable success In 1 month, they shakabuku'd 11,111 members in Osaka alone. So this was built on the Gosho. Well, we can't do activities quite so intensely yet. But nevertheless, all our lives should be based on these teachings and the spirit that they were taught in. Now, likewise, as you know, we've arranged a monthly Gosho lecture which I shall give to you each month, and there's also a chapter Gosho lecture which will be given by your chapter chief or your general chapter chief towards the end of every month. And then we've asked the district leaders that at every discussion meeting, one little quotation of the Gosho will be discussed, or a short talk will be given on it, and main points brought out of it. So always, I hope from now on, our spirit is going to be refreshed by the Gosho. Now, this Gosho that we're going to do tonight, called Reply to Lord Nanjo, was written 1 year before Nichiren Daishonin died. So, anyone like to volunteer what year that was? Yes.
1278.
No. 1281. Nichiren Daishonin died in 1282. And this was written in 1281 from the place where he had retired to in Mount Minobu. And he wrote it, as you see, to Lord Nanjo. Lord Nanjo was Nanjo Tokimitsu, who's a really important person in the history of true Buddhism. Nanjo Tokimitsu was not a priest, he was a lay follower, just like we are. Anyone know the great thing, especially great thing that he did? Yes, Peter.
He donated the land to Taiseki.
That's right. It was Nanjo Tokimitsu who donated the land on which our head temple, Taisekiji, is built, and where the Daiga Honson is enshrined. So we all really have to be thankful for Nanjo Tokimitsu. That was a very difficult time. When Nichiren Daishonin died, there were 6 senior or elder priests, closest, as it were, in the line of succession to him. And 5 of them went taiten. 1 remained, and that was Nikko Shonin. And the priests who went taiten set off in their own direction. They hadn't understood the true teachings of the Buddha, and they thought that they could improve them and bend them to their own liking and their own ways. So those 5 priests went in different directions and tried to found other sects with no great success. But Nikko Shonin, who had been always closest to his master, completely understood Nichiren Daishonin's wishes for the future. And he, in accordance with those wishes, which are still recorded in what they call the transfer documents of Taisekiji, he transferred the Daiga Honson from Mount Minobu to this land at Taisekiji, which was donated by Nanjo Tokimitsu. And there he established the beginnings of what is now the head temple of Nichiren Shoshu today. So Nanjo Tokimitsu, we really have to be grateful to. And that beautiful place, right at the foot of Mount Fuji, is Nichiren Shoshu's because of him. So we'll ask Max now to read the Gosho all the way through, and then we'll take it stage by stage. Thank you, Max.
just received a message from your envoy and hear that you are suffering from an illness. I hope that you will obtain medical treatment immediately and come to see me as soon as possible. Also, I have received your gifts of a horseback load of salt, a bale of soybeans, a bag of seaweed, and a bamboo container of sake. I have not seen you since you returned home from the province of Ueno, and you have been on my mind. It is difficult to describe how much I appreciate your sincerity in sending this letter together with these various gifts. If I repeat this legend now, it may sound new, but it is said that Tokusho Doji, who offered a mud pie to the Buddha, was born as King Asoka and ruled a great part of India. Since the Buddha is so respect-worthy, the boy was rewarded with such a remarkable benefit, even though the pie was only mud. However, Sakyamuni Buddha says that the benefits one will receive by serving the votary of the Lotus Sutra in Mappo for but a single day are incomparably greater than those one will obtain if he offers an immeasurable amount of treasures to the Buddha for 100 million aeons. It is hard to describe the sincere consideration with which you have served the votary of the Lotus Sutra for the past several years. If the Buddha's words are true, you will definitely be born in the pure land of Yoju-sen. What a splendid blessing. This is a mountainous place, distant from all human habitation. There is not a single village in any direction. This is such a forsaken hovel that since I, Nichiren, embrace in confidence the great secret law which I inherited from Sakyamuni Buddha at Ryoju-sen, my heart is where all the Buddhas enter nirvana. My tongue is where they turn the wheel of teaching. My throat is the way in which they emerge into this world, and my mouth is the very place they attain enlightenment. Since this is where the wondrous votary of the Lotus Sutra dwells, how can it be inferior to the pure land of Ryoju-sen? This indicates a principle stating that since the law is supreme, the person is respect-worthy. And since the person is respect-worthy, the land is sacred. The Jinriki chapter reads, "Be it in the woods, under the trees, or in the temple, the Buddhas will enter nirvana." Those who visit this honorable place can instantly expiate all the bad causes they have committed since the endless past and transform the three karmas into the three virtues. A suffering man of central India once visited the cold Munechi pond to cleanse himself of the heavy worries in his heart and proclaimed that it satisfied all his desires just as Shoryochi pond. Although this is different from the present circumstances, the principle is quite the same. Thus, Ryoju-sen of India is this Mount Minabu, my location. Your last visit was a very long time ago. Try to come to see me at the earliest possible occasion. I am awaiting you here. How splendid your sincerity is. In truth, how splendid. In my hand, Nichiren, September the 11th, the 4th year of Koan.
Thank you very much, mate. Somebody yesterday in Southampton said, why was it that Nichiren Daishonin complicated his writings by talking about nirvana and Ryoju-sen and things like the Shoryochi pond and all the rest of it. And this, of course, is difficult and sometimes almost irritating to us today. But we have to remember that these letters were written about 700 years ago. And there are two reasons why he referred to these things which seem so remote to us in order to explain what he wanted to say. First of all, many of these references were to old legends and folklore which were part of the Japanese scene. In other words, children, instead of being brought up on nursery rhymes, were brought up on stories from the past, especially in Japan, stories from the history of China, and stories based on the early history of Buddhism. That was one reason. The second reason is much more important. Nichiren Daishonin wanted to show that what he was preaching was in the true flow of Buddhism over 2,000 years from the days of Shakyamuni. So he refers often to Shakyamuni's teachings and makes reference to quotations from Shakyamuni. Because you must remember that Japan at that time was still filled with people who were traditionally anyway, even if not in fact, following Shakyamuni's earlier teachings. And he wanted to show that the flow was straight, clear, and direct from Shakyamuni's teachings to his own. Now this Gosho, the main point which comes out of it is in Japanese called Ninpo Ika. Ninpo Ika. Many of you know this. Who'd like to say what Ninpo Ika means? Anybody? Have a go. Doesn't matter if you're wrong. Yes. Thank you very much. The inseparability of the person and the law. The inseparability of the person and the law. And the most important sentence is about 10 or 11 lines from the bottom of the first page. This indicates a principle stating that since the law is supreme, the person is respect-worthy. And since the person is respect-worthy, the land is sacred. That is the most important sentence, in fact, in the whole Gosho. Now, the theoretical explanation of Ninpo Ika is that, of course, the law always exists. The law of Nam-myoho Renge Kyo is the law of life, or the law of the universe, so it's always there. But unless there is the person to teach it, no one will ever know about it, and no one can ever base their lives in harmony with it. So the person is essential to the law. And Nichiren Daishonin said in another Gosho, it is the law to which you direct yourself and not the person, because the law is always there. But the person is vital to the law in order to teach it. So if you talk to somebody about Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, you are the person. And your relationship to the law, when you're trying to make someone understand Buddhism, is complete. When you chant Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, you are completely in total relationship with the law once you really achieve fusion with the Gohonzon. So whenever you make great efforts to shakabuku, or to do great activities, to give a great experience at a meeting, or to explain something clearly, you are representing the person and the law. Of course, initially, the person is Nichiren Daishonin, the Buddha, and the law is Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. Today, the person is the Soka Gakkai, because only the Soka Gakkai are teaching the law of Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. And the Soka Gakkai, of course, means every member of the Soka Gakkai, which is us and people in Brazil and Hong Kong and all over the world. So we have to really strive more and more to achieve Ninpo Ika. Because out of this relationship between us and the law not only can we teach the law, but also we can reap the benefits and rewards of the law. So remember, some of you, when Mr. Izumi was announcing the new organization, and he said it's so important for the new leaders, group leaders, district leaders, and so on, to achieve Ninpo Ikka. If you achieve Ninpo Ikka, oneness between you and the law, then that will reflect on everyone round you and everything round you in your environment. So a group leader, if he really strives to become one with the law, will quite soon lead the members of his group to the same position. Same with the district, same with the chapter. So this we really have to strive for. And of course the beginning of it all is Gongyo and Daimoku. This is where Ninpo Ikka begins each day, by struggling with our Gongyo, trying to do a great one, even though we may feel awful. This is the struggle to achieve oneness with the law, right at the beginning of your day. And through doing that, you reap the benefits all through the day. And your understanding of the law goes deeper and deeper. And your ability to teach it grows greater and greater. And this struggle, of course, is the human evolution that leads you in the end, to enlightenment. And an enlightened person, a Buddha, is all the time in Ninpo Ikka. So this is the principle which Nichiren Daishonin is explaining in this Gosho. So there are many, many other important points as well. Okay, so we'll take the first sentence next.
I have just received a message from your envoy and hear that you are suffering from an illness. I hope that you will obtain medical treatment immediately and come to see me as soon as possible.
Thank you. Then if you look at the end of the Gosho, Nichiren Daishonin says, try to come to see me at the earliest possible occasion. I am awaiting you here. How splendid your sincerity is. In truth, how splendid. And I think these sentences really show the incredible relationship which is called in Japanese Shite Funi, or the master-disciple relationship. Nichiren Daishonin wanted so much to see this disciple of his. So even though he had many other concerns, his heart was going out to Nanjo Tokimitsu, just as his heart was going out to all his other followers. And his concern for him was great. He advises him to have medical treatment. And he tells him, please come and see me. We don't know why Nanjo Tokimitsu had been absent for so long from visiting the Daishonin. But he was a really active person. He was still young, probably about 28 at that time. So he was an extremely active man. During the persecutions of Atsuhara, which culminated in 3 farmers being beheaded because they refused to stop chanting Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, Nanjo Tokimitsu, who was the lord of that area, did a great deal to protect his followers. And he and his family in turn were persecuted also. And he was always taking the lead in the activities for Nichiren Daishonin. So I believe that this is the reason. He was so anxious to get on with things, and he was young and full of great spirit. And he felt this was his task on behalf of Nichiren. And I think it's very much the same today. Of course, many of us who know Sensei would like to see him more. Those of you who don't know him want to see him. But our job is here We must represent Sensei here in the UK, or in Clapham, or Brixton, or St. John's Wood, or Swiss Cottage, or wherever it is. We represent the Buddha in these places, and we must get on with the task the Buddha wishes, which is to achieve peace and happiness in our lives and in other lives. This is Nimpo Ika. When we first joined, and when NSUK was very young, they were always calling out for Sensei. Sensei, Sensei, I want to see you. They wanted the strength that he can give you. But now it's different, isn't it? We know we have to get on with it because we're growing up in this faith. So we have to do the job for him. And just the same as we long to see him, he is longing to see us. Always he's asking about the European members, but he's also asking about the Brazilian members and the Hong Kong members and the German members. His concern is everywhere. And of course his connection to us and our connection to him is extremely close because we're all chanting Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. Just the same as our connection to Brazil and to Hong Kong or Peru or Australia is close because we are chanting Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. Nam-myoho Renge Kyo has no limits of time or space. The thread of connection between all of us is the thread of life, and down that thread of life, which is common to all, Nam-myoho Renge Kyo must flow. So this is why we can work in unity. This is why we can achieve Kosen Rufu, because we are in rhythm, all of us, whatever country we may be in. This is why so often we find that we're moving towards doing something even before we hear that Sensei is giving guidance that we should do it. This is what it should be, because through our Daimoku we can anticipate what is needed. This is proof of the workings of Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. I'd just like to read you again Sensei's message to us, or a little bit of it, from when we were at summer course. He says, I strongly believe that there is no distance between you and me, because you are always in my heart, and I am always in your lives. Nam-myoho Renge Kyo is why, isn't it? So when things are difficult and trying, it's great to think of Sensei. Even if you've never met him, you read what he writes, and you know what he writes is great. Maybe when you first joined, you test it and you think, is this man really as good as everyone says he is? But you read more and you find always what he writes is great. So if things are difficult, you think of Sensei. What would Sensei be doing now? You read The Human Revolution, and you know, you can feel what Sensei would do, because he's been through it all already, when Japan was at about the stage that we are in now, in our development in the UK. Once at Tretz, when we did a fantastic Gongyo and a marvelous Daimoku, and we were all in such unity together, I really felt Sensei right there in front of us. Through Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, he's there. It's not imagination. The spirit of Sensei and the spirit of Nichiren Daishonin can be with us always if we only open our minds to it. So that fantastic day, which I'll never forget, when we did, I don't know whether you remember, I think it was on Europe Day, and we did a fantastic Gongyo and a most wonderful, united, tremendous Daimoku. Definitely the spirit of Sensei was there. Of course it was. It was Europe Day, and he was certainly chanting Daimoku for us all. So that was Sensei's Gongyo, Sensei's Daimoku, not mine. And it was his spirit that really filled us and made us so united. No imagination in this, no magic, but the line of Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. Okay, Max. Can I tell you to stop?
Also, I have received your gifts of a horseback load of salt, a bale of soybeans, a bag of seaweed, and a bamboo container of sake. I have not seen you since you returned home from the province of Ueno, and you have been on my mind. It is difficult to describe how much I appreciate your sincerity in sending this letter together with these various gifts. If I repeat this legend now, it may sound new, but it is said that Tokusho Doji, who offered a mud pie to the Buddha, was born as King Asoka and ruled a great part of India. Since the Buddha is so respect-worthy, the boy was rewarded with such a remarkable benefit, even though the pie was only mud.
Thank you very much. This part, as you can see, refers to contribution. Contribution to the Buddha. And some very important points come out of this. The first thing that I think it's important to understand is that in Buddhism there are two forms of contribution. One is known as the contribution of treasure, and the other is contribution of the law. Contribution, as you know, has a Japanese word gokuyo. So gokuyo of treasure and gokuyo of law. Gokuyo of treasure is giving material things. Gokuyo of law is giving your life or spirit. So you can see that the most important gokuyo, contribution, is the gokuyo of law. Because the gokuyo of treasure, giving of material things, must, to be of value, come from the spirit also. For instance, it's no good every day just planting a plate of bananas in front of your gohonzon, because it looks nice. And when they get a bit rotten, you think, oh dear, they don't look very good, I better go out and buy some more. And you go and buy some more and plant them there again. Of course, the bananas are very nice for you to eat, probably. But as a gokuyo of treasure, they're worthless. When you give fruit to the gohonzon, this is like your sincere gesture of thankfulness, of gratitude for being alive, of gratitude for having enough money to buy food, of gratitude that you've heard about Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, and that you can gain strength and wisdom from its practice. This is what gifts are to the gohonzon. But if you just plant it there regularly, because you haven't got a bowl on the sideboard and it looks nicer in front of the Butsudan, it's worthless. Because the gokuyo of treasure is not based on the gokuyo of law, on the contribution of the law, of the spirit or the heart. So this is what all contribution must be. So if Nanjo Tokimitsu had sent bags of seaweed and bamboo containers of sake and all the rest of it to Nichiren Daishonin, but it was just done like a sort of showy or automatic gesture, or like habit or custom, of course Nichiren Daishonin would have got great value himself from the seaweed and the sake. But Nanjo Tokimitsu would have got nothing. And the great thing about Buddhism is that what the effort you make, the sincerity of the effort, immediately brings you the reward. So Nichiren Daishonin would have been really miserable if he had thought that Nanjo Tokimitsu was sending these things automatically to him, just out of a sense of duty. But because he knew he was sending them with a real spirit of wanting to help and serve the Buddha, then he was happy because he knew the reward that would come to him by the law of cause and effect. So I think this is a most important point. Now, Gokuyo of the law can take many forms. Whatever you do with real sincerity for the sake of Kosen Rufu, for the sake of other people's happiness, is Gokuyo of the law. Provided you do it sincerely and because you wish to with all your heart. But if you do it complaining all the time, it's worthless. The law of cause and effect is absolutely inescapable, unavoidable. You do something great and you make a great effort to do it, and you get fantastic reward. But if you do something complaining, dragging your feet, as it were, you won't get any reward. It's the effort that counts. This is Gokuyo of the law. So Nichiren Daishonin says, this old story about this little boy giving a mud pie to the Buddha, maybe when you think about it this way, it will seem like a new story. Considered from the deeper aspect of the Gokuyo of treasure and the law, this little boy was so pure-hearted. He had nothing, and he was in rags playing with another little chap. And the Buddha was walking by, and he'd heard so much about the Buddha, and probably he felt something wonderful about the Buddha. And so as he walked by, he quickly patted this little mud pie and ran over and gave it to him. But the reward that he got was fantastic. This is the point of this story. Out of all measure, or out of all proportion to the gift that he gave. But what mattered was this sincerity in his heart. So gratitude is so important. Gongyo is gratitude. Every day, the first, the second, the third prayer is gratitude. Thankfulness for being alive. Thankfulness that one isn't starving in Bangladesh. Thankfulness that our homes haven't been wrecked by hurricanes. Or that there's been no violence in our family. Or whatever it may be. Thankfulness that your children are okay. Sometimes Sensei has said you should live each day as if it's your last. The meaning, you know, that you really start each day feeling thankful for what's happened and really determining to make this day the greatest day. And the Gongyo, the practice of Gongyo, helps you to do this. It helps to vitalize you, and it helps you to make great efforts. So this is Gokuyo of treasure and the law.
However, Sakyamuni Buddha says that the benefits one will receive by serving the votary of the Lotus Sutra in Mappo, but for but a single day, are incomparably greater than those one will obtain if he offers an immeasurable amount of treasures to the Buddha for 100 million aeons. It is hard to describe the sincere consideration with which you have served the votary of the Lotus Sutra for the past several years. If the Buddha's words are true, you will definitely be born in the pure land of Yoju-sen. What a splendid blessing.
Thank you very much. Well, the key word there is serving. Shakyamuni Buddha says that the benefits one will receive by serving the votary of the Lotus Sutra in Mappo for but a single day are incomparably greater than those one will obtain if he offers an immeasurable amount of treasures to the Buddha for 100 million years. Serving in Mappo, which is now. So you remember, the Buddha predicted that the age of Mappo would begin about 2,000 years, that was Shakyamuni Buddha, 2,000 years after he died. And so this age of Mappo began round about the year 900 or 1000 or 1000. And Shakyamuni Buddha, 2,000 years before, had taught that when this age began, there would be chaos and unhappiness and misery in the world. And you remember he said at that time, the Lotus Sutra will be the only teaching that can give people happiness. And then he described the ceremony of the treasure tower. We'll deal with this in another Gosha lecture, so I won't dwell on it today. But in the ceremony of the treasure tower, Shakyamuni Buddha handed over the teaching of the Lotus Sutra to the Buddha of Mappo, Nichiren Daishonin, or Bodhisattva Jogyo, as he was known in that story. And at the same time, Shakyamuni's disciples all said, I want to live in Mappo. I'll do the teaching and the propagation of this law in Mappo. And Shakyamuni said, no, you can't. You'll never have the courage to do it. And as he said that, tens of thousands of people appeared. And Shakyamuni Buddha said, these are the bodhisattvas of the earth who will teach the law of Nam-myoho Renge Kyo in Mappo and take ignorance away from the world. So, of course, we teach the law of Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. We are bodhisattvas of the earth. We are the people that Shakyamuni Buddha was referring to. And we serve the votary of the Lotus Sutra in Mappo, which is Nichiren Daishonin. The benefits one will receive by serving the votary of the Lotus Sutra in Mappo for but a single day are incomparably greater than those one will obtain if he offers an immeasurable amount of treasures to the Buddha for 100 million years. Why? Again, because of the effort. So sometimes when we're struggling and we're short of money and not feeling well, everything seems to be going wrong, we forget this. It's because of these things happening that in the end you get the great benefits. It's because you're suffering and fighting to overcome that that you chant lots of Daimoku. And because you do that, you bring out all your wisdom and life force. And you can overcome your problems. And this great effort to really practice and trust the Gohonzon is what brings you the fantastic benefits. But this is only half the story, isn't it? The practice of Buddhism is Jigyo and Keta. Practice for yourself, practice for others. So you struggle like mad to get over your difficulties. And always you find you can. Nothing that you suffer will ever be greater than you can overcome. This is in the very nature of the law of the universe. Everything is in perfect balance. because you're struggling, the pressure gets greater, but never greater than you can overcome yourself with the power of the Gohonzon. And through this you grow. Through this you get faith. Through this you get wisdom, compassion, life force, good health. Everything comes through the struggle. So what's the purpose of our organization? It's to point this out to each other. When we get low and a bit miserable, a bit depressed, someone always says to you, just keep chanting. Nichiren Daishonin said, 12 days to walk to Kyoto to see the moon. What's the good of stopping on the 11th? This is what the organization is for. So that we can point these things out to each other, and so that we can really keep chanting. So through this great effort, and through the activities that we combine with it, the keta, the practice for others, we are completely serving the Buddha, and we are completely struggling to achieve Nimpo-ika, oneness with the law. So really in the end, when you look upon these things with a wider view, these struggles are great. Of course, when you're in the middle of it, they don't seem very nice at all. But in the end, I really believe, I haven't reached that stage yet, but I really believe in the end, you'll almost welcome those struggles. You'll really welcome them. Great, here's another chance. So this is really the practice of Buddhism. And when you think about it, of course it has to be, doesn't it? We are trying to be positive against negative. Of course it's a struggle. So all the universe is filled with those two forces. It must be a struggle. But through it, the benefits are boundless. When you have difficulties, you shouldn't lean on the Gohonzon. I don't mean physically, of course. This isn't the practice of Buddhism. The practice of Buddhism isn't to sit and wait for some magic happening that will like drop in your lap. The Gohonzon is not a god, is it? It's not like Aladdin's lamp. You have to use what the Gohonzon gives you, what the Gohonzon generates inside you, which is wisdom, life force, and compassion. You have to use it. If your business is going down, it's no good just sitting. All right, you chant Daimoku and saying, I'll just wait for something to happen. But it's very easy to do this. It's very easy to say, well, I'm chanting a lot of Daimoku, something must happen. But this isn't the practice of Buddhism. The practice of Buddhism is using what the practice gives you, which is those three things of life force, wisdom, and compassion. So you use those for all your worth to overcome the problem in your environment. And then, because you make this fantastic effort, you suddenly get rewards that you never expected. So the rewards come because, again, of the effort to use what the Gohonzon gives you. And then you get something incredible out of the blue that you never dreamt of. So in no way is Buddhism passive, is it? It's really a practice of action, and action which brings such fantastic rewards.
This is a mountainous place, distant from all human habitation. There is not a single village in any direction. This is such a forsaken hovel that since I, Nichiren, embrace in confidence the great secret law which I inherited from Sakyamuni Buddha at Ryoju-sen, my heart is where all the Buddhas enter nirvana. My tongue is where they turn the wheel of teachings. My throat is the way in which they emerge into this world, and my mouth is the very place they attain enlightenment.
Thank you. What Nichiren Daishonin is saying here is that even though at that time he was living in the poorest of circumstances, supported entirely by his followers, living in quite a miserable place in the mountains, no comforts or any habitations near, he was indestructibly happy because he knew that he was one with the law. Because he knew he was the very epitome of Nimpoika. And it's the same with us. Even though at the moment we may be really not too pleased with our circumstances, maybe we hate this small room we're living in, or maybe we're disgusted having to go to that bathroom where the other tenant has funny habits. So many things we may not like, but this doesn't matter. You struggle to practice Buddhism, Jigyo and Keita, for yourself and for others. Daimoku, Shakabuku. Daimoku, Shakabuku. And you will get rewards beyond your belief. Now recently, as you know, we've had visits from so many members from Japan who've been practicing many, many years. And their experiences are so fantastic. It's like living proof of the workings of the law. They struggled like hell in the early days, in the aftermath of the war, when Japan was in ruins, economically and materially. But they fought, and they never gave up this Buddhism. They never gave up chanting. And they're now living proof of this. They have material good fortune, and they have incredible spiritual good fortune, which absolutely radiates out of them, doesn't it? This is proof of Buddhism at work. There's that famous restaurant by the river called the Waterside Inn, where they had their last lunch before they went to the airport, was where Sensei had dinner and talked with members of NSUK, was it 3 years ago now? 4 years ago, 3 years ago. And some of you in this room were there. Hands up who was there. Yeah, great. But Sensei pointed to a great willow tree outside. And he said, this tree didn't grow like this overnight in all its beauty. This is like the practice of Buddhism. You practice Buddhism not just for tomorrow, but for your life. And in the end, you'll be like that beautiful willow tree. So it doesn't matter what your circumstances are now. Just keep practicing, and definitely they will change to a fantastic degree, step by step by step. So Nichiren Daishonin was saying this. Then he said, he explained why. Because he was teaching Buddhism. My heart is where everything I say is born. My tongue is where the words are made.
Obscure benefit.
大きすぎてこの目で目開いてるんだけれども見えないっていう目がご利益のことを目を焼く。
And another benefit you cannot see because too big. If you open your eye and the person is still, because too big you cannot see. That we call inconspicuous benefit.
目は開いとって見えないご利益がありますかってみんな思うんだ。
So someone asks, open your eye, but still something you cannot see.
それあるから目をというんだ。
And why we call in Japanese myoyaku? Myo is mystic. Because you open your eye, still you cannot see.
この前も話したと
Because
思
myo.
う。朝出かけてって自動車が自転車にぶつかって怪我が軽く済むというと、今日はご本尊さんのおかげで死の武家を助かったありがとうございました。ご本尊様いて一生懸命で大務を唱える。ところが朝出かけてって何もぶつからずに夕方帰ってくると、私一日何も今日いいことがなかったわなんて言う。
So in the morning when you went to work and so you are hit by car and you immediately think, due to chanting Daimoku, I received lighter, lighter punishment. This is due to Gohonzon. You really feel thanks and gratitude to Gohonzon. But some days you going to work and no one hits you, no car hits you. Then when you return, I haven't received anything.
病気が長い病気が材木で治るというと、ご本尊さんのおかげで病気を治してもらったんだ、ありがとうございました、ご本尊様とお礼を言う。ところが5年も10年も病気をしなかったと言うてお礼言う人は少ないよ。
Same thing. Let's say someone will suffer from sickness 5 years, 6 years, and start chanting Daimoku to Gohonzon and recover. Really, this person feel gratitude to Gohonzon. Thank you very much, Gohonzon. My sickness recovered due to you, due to Gohonzon. But normal people feel thanks, spending, let's say, healthy life for 5 years.
交通事故に軽く済んだご利益よりも合わなかったご利益の方が大きい。病気が治ったご利益よりも病気にならなかったご利益の方が大きい。これが見えねえんだよ。
Therefore, you see, accident, no accident and accident. No accident is much great benefit. Sickness and no sickness much great benefit. But because of too big, you cannot see.
はっきりと皆さん方目が開いているんだから、目を焼くの現象を見せてあげましょうかってこの前言ったじゃない。
And then you open your eye, but still you cannot see. Therefore, I explain to you myoyaku.
これも私もこれで生まれた時には可愛い坊やでありましたって言うんだよ。
When I born about 60 years ago, I was a pretty, very pretty baby.
一晩寝て目が覚めてみればいつも昨日と同じ僕だった。
I slept, and one day, I slept in night, and then wake up in the morning. Still, I find pretty boy.
毎日昨日と同じ昨日と同じ昨日と同じ昨日と同じ今日まで来たんだから、僕も赤ちゃんも同じわけだろ、イコールイコールだから。
So every day I was spending, sleep and wake, sleep and wake, sleep and wake. In other words, I slept and find myself a very pretty boy. And 5, 5, and 10 years, 20 years, and 60 years now. So supposed to be, because of the succession of pretty boys, I should be pretty boy. Today,
変わった日は一日もないんだもん、いくら考えても。
there's none of the days, I don't find pretty boys. Just succeeding.
どなたが見ても赤ちゃんではないって一目でわかるでしょ、これ。
But you can see I'm not baby, aren't I?
というように、一日一日見れば変化は全然ないけど、時が経ってみればはっきりと結果が出てくる。これを見ようやく。
So if you observe day by day, you cannot see progress, or you cannot see advance, or you cannot see good points. But through long-term days, or long-term years, you can see clearly the benefit.
で、したがって孤独があったことがなかったとかつまらんことで大変だけはしていけない。
So what I want to say, you shouldn't tighten depending on whether you receive kudoku benefit or not.
どんなことでも困ったことがあるならば、ご本尊様に解決できるまでご本尊お願いするやないと働きます。
So you should determine, no matter what difficulty encountered to you, you got chandaimoku until you solve.
孤独があったならばご本尊に感謝をし、悩みがあったならば解決まで大無を唱え、苦楽ともに思い合わせて大無を唱えるというところに真理がある。
So if you receive hardship, to chant daimoku until solve. And if you receive benefit, thanks to Gohonzon. Therefore, no matter whether you are receiving good or bad, or benefit or punishment, no matter what, you chant daimoku. There is the basic attitude of faith.
悩みが大きかったら大きかったほど大無を唱えることが大事なんです。
So if you receive suffer more or great suffer, then chant more. More great suffer, more chant.
ロンドンのデパートも同じことを買い物する場合にはたくさん買う場合にはたくさんお金を持っていかなきゃ売ってくれないはずだ。
Same things we can say in the daily life or daily time. If you want to buy more things in the department, you have to take money more.
お金を少し持ってたくさん売ってくれるデパートがあったら教えてほしい。
I would like to know if there's any department store, really small money, and I can get many things.
どこの国行って探してみてもないよ、これだけ。
You cannot find it anywhere.
ところが信心の中にはいるんだ。題目は人の3分の1ぐらいかあげないくせに、願いだけ人の3倍ぐらいしてる。
However, we may find person who are doing this kind of stupid things in Buddhism, doing practice 1/3, practice as usual, and asking Gohonjin about 3 times more than usual.
皆さん方この国にもあるでしょう。生命保険、障害保険、火災保険ってありますかって。
In this country we have insurance, life insurance or accidental insurance.
障害保険というのは怪我をしたときご利益、生命保険は死んだときにご利益、火災保険は火事になったらご利益って言うんですよ。
So insurance, like life insurance, when you die, you get benefit, or accidental insurance, when you made accident, you can get the benefit.
むしろ合わない方のご利益の方の保険が欲しいじゃないか。
So it means really important things, not make an accident. That's more important.
火事になってからご利益の保険がもらえたってしょうがないんだよ。
So this is no use. After fire happens and you receive some money. It's most important not have fire.
生命保険だってね、掛け金が少なくてたくさんもらえるという生命保険ありますかこれ。
And in life insurance, small money, small payment, and you can get large sum of money after your pass. There's none of the insurance company doing like that.
たくさんもらうためにはたくさんかけなきゃいけない。たくさんかけるためには貧乏人じゃ保険は役立たない。
So in order to receive the great sum of money, you have to put lot of money every month.
たくさんお金を持ってした保険なんかいらん、保険金なんかいらねえんだから。
Therefore, insurance really, if you want to receive a lot of money through insurance, poor people is difficult to do because you have to put a lot of money
僕だ
every
って
month.
僕だって生命保険いっぱいかけてるんだけど掛け金がねえからかけないんだから。
Therefore, poor people insurance, life insurance, not very good. Rich people can afford it, but rich people didn't know life insurance because they have money already.
そこで全てが変読訳できるの保険みたいな貧乏人でも掛け金ができるのはご本尊様の題目じゃないか。
So, but this is the only thing Gohanjon or Daimoku really chant, and you can change it, and you can receive whatever you want.
そこで皆さん方時間がないから申し上げます。
The words of teaching come from the throat, and my mouth is the very place they attain enlightenment. From the moment you chant Nam-myoho Renge Kyo with sincerity, you're in the Buddha state. Of course, when you stop chanting, you leave that state. But when you say it, you're in the Buddha state. From the moment you start to talk to somebody about Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, you are serving the Buddha. And you are already making the cause for great reward in your life. So he is saying, why should I be unhappy? I have found happiness inside me, and I know that every time I speak one word or one teaching or one phrase of Buddhism, I shall get rewards beyond belief. So this is what we want to do. When Sensei says to us, you should throw yourself into the battle of Kosen Rufu and still be fighting out to the day you die. This is what he means. If you do great activities, you reap fantastic rewards. And most important of all, you change your karma. You cannot change your karma just by chanting Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, just by doing Daimoku. You have to do Shakabuku. You have to do great activities. So maybe this sounds like a catch, Well, why should the Buddha say the only way to change your karma is to do Shakabuku? It sounds like some sort of trick story. But the reason is not difficult to understand. Karma is like a chain, isn't it, of causes that you've made and effects. So you begin to see, by the time you're my age, your karma. Maybe when you're young it's not so easy to see. But even before I ever practiced Buddhism, I could see it so clearly. Every 5 years, every 7 years, the same thing happening. the same misery, the same troubles, the same problems, just slightly different circumstances, but fundamentally the same. This is the chain of karma, the chain of your unhappy destiny. So what is it always drags you along that chain? It's your selfish desires based on your ego, always pulling you through greed or one of the lower worlds in a direction which is actually totally wrong for your happiness. So you make a cause which is not good, and the effect is to be pulled the wrong way. And being pulled the wrong way makes you make another cause, and so it goes on, always in an endless chain, being dragged the wrong way by your desires. So how do you break that? Of course, you have to break it by not being dragged the wrong way by your desires. And the only way to do this is to concern yourself so much with other people's lives and with creating value and being positive and progressive in your life, that it absorbs your life. And there is no chance for these desires to pull you. But of course this isn't easy. If you said, I'm never going to be pulled in any direction by my ego again, never in the rest of my life will I give in to my stupid desires, probably it would last for a fortnight, like the New Year resolutions that people make, and then off you'd be going down the old track. So you have to have strength in order to keep yourself acting from the bodhisattva state, the state where you desire to help others and create a better world. And of course, that power that holds you there is Daimoku. So really, it's not at all difficult to understand, but of course, it's difficult to do sometimes. But this is absolutely the only way that you can break your karma, that you will not be dragged down always along that same foolish path. So Shakabuku is not just some trick to get you to chant Daimoku. Shakabuku is vital for your happiness, to change your karma. So this is why Sensei says, throw yourself into your activities up to the very day you die, because he wants us to change our karma. At the same time, of course, like all things in Buddhism, there is a perfect balance. Unless we Shakabuku, Buddhism dies. And once again, the world will become totally ignorant about the very law that created it and that it exists on. So always the perfect balance. We must make Buddhism live, but also to be happy we must change our karma. Thank you.
Since this is where the wondrous votary of the Lotus Sutra dwells, how can it be inferior to the pure land of Ryoju-sen? This indicates a principle stating that since the law is supreme, the person is respect-worthy. And since the person is respect-worthy, the land is sacred.
Now this is the famous quotation. Ryoju-sen was the Eagle Peak, which is where Shakyamuni Buddha taught the Lotus Sutra. So he says, because I am now teaching this sutra, how can this place be any the worse than the Eagle Peak itself? The benefits of the law must come to me here, just the same as they would have come to anybody who was on Eagle Peak with Shakyamuni Buddha. And it's the same with us today. Nowadays, Mount Minobu, where Nichiren Daishonin was, has no great significance. In fact, there's a temple there still practicing distorted teachings of Nichiren Daishonin, still to this day. But what matters now is where the Daigohonzon was transferred to Taisekiji. So the effort you make to see the Daigohonzon brings wonderful reward. But equally, the effort you make to see the European Gohonzon brings wonderful reward. Equally, the effort you make to go to a discussion meeting brings great reward. Or to drag yourself up from the telly and go out and do a home visit to someone who's trying to learn Gongyo brings the reward. Wherever you may be, if you are practicing Buddhism, will become the Buddha's land. So the Buddha's land appears through the other great principle of Shitefuni, of Eshofuni, the inseparability of your life and the environment. So Nichiren Daishonin was teaching on Mount Minobu. Therefore, Mount Minobu was the Buddha's land. You get down in front of your Gohonzon in your house and sincerely practice. You create the Buddha's land in your house. When you go to a discussion meeting, instead of hiding behind everyone's back, you try to warmly welcome everybody, and you give great experiences. You are helping to create the Buddha's land in that discussion meeting. Tretz, of course, is the Buddha's land. You can feel it when you go there. It's indefinable, isn't it? But there's just something about Tretz. And at the moment, there are so few of us in Europe. But as we grow, as we shakabuku and teach more and more people, so the atmosphere of Tretz becomes the atmosphere of the whole of Europe, the Buddha's land. Eshofuni. If you activate your Buddha nature through chanting Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, or through doing great activities, you activate the Buddha nature in everything around you because of the thread of life that exists between everything with life and yourself. So this is what he means when he says, this indicates the principle stating that since the law is supreme, since we practice the law, the person is automatically respect-worthy. And since the person is respect-worthy, the land is sacred. I was so struck by what Mr. Izumi said when he was talking about what they call Kosen-rufu Gongyo. We don't do it here yet because we haven't got a center where we can do it together. But every month, in every country where there are centers, or kaikans as they're called, or community centers where people can gather together, on the first Sunday of that month, they hold a Kosen-rufu Gongyo at 10 o'clock, I think it is, in the morning. And Mr. Izumi was saying, isn't it a fantastic thought that because of the 24-hour clock and the time differences all around the world, through the whole of that day, there is always Gongyo and Daimoku being chanted somewhere in the world. So, of course, you can think of the effect of that Daimoku on the world itself, on that day. It's not just wasted. If you can chant Daimoku and help your mother who's sick somewhere far away, the Daimoku you chant isn't just disappearing into nowhere. The Daimoku you chant for Kosen Rufu isn't wasted. It is spreading like little ripples the Buddha's land wider and wider. So in Japan today, definitely you can begin to see this. You can begin to see that the Buddha's land is beginning to spread in Japan, because there are so many millions chanting Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. So this is what we have to do in Europe and the UK. Not one Daimoku is wasted. Not one Daimoku doesn't have an effect on something or someone in our environment. So it's so easy, isn't it? When we're chanting, we just think, oh, it's just me in this funny little room, but I have Gohonzon, this is great, but really it's just me and the Gohonzon, you know? This isn't so. There's no limit of time or space to sound. Your Nam-myoho Renge Kyo is going far beyond the bounds of that room. So you look at the Gohonzon maybe, and then try to see it wider, greater. Increase the dimension of your view of the Gohonzon. So on the right you have Taho Buddha, on the right-hand side of the Gohonzon, or as you look at it. The Taho Buddha represents all the good fortune that the Buddha brings and attracts from the environment. And on the left-hand side, you have Shakyamuni Buddha, representing wisdom, all the wisdom that the Buddha draws from within himself. And down the center, Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. This isn't a limited thing, just that small piece of scroll, is it? The extent and the dimensions of what it's doing is limitless. So truly when you're chanting Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, the whole universe is before you. I know it's difficult to visualize, but the only limit is one's own imagination. But through study, through feeling Nichiren Daishonin's words, through listening to Sensei's guidance and reading it, definitely one's mind opens more and more, you know? Quite naturally. We just go on chanting, and the dimension that we can take in grows and grows. Okay?
The Jinriki chapter reads, "Be it in the woods, under the trees, or in the temple, the Buddhas will enter nirvana. Those who visit this honorable place can instantly expiate all the bad causes they have committed since the endless past, and transform the three karmas into the three virtues."
So he's referring there not only to the people who enter his camp on Mount Minobu, the people who enter the Buddha's land, the people who get down on their knees and chant Daimoku, the people who go to meetings and do activities. It doesn't matter where. These will, like the Buddhas, enter nirvana. Nirvana means not heaven. Nirvana means the Buddha state, achieving in the end Buddhahood or enlightenment in your life. Those who visit this honorable place can instantly expiate all the bad causes they have committed since the endless past and transform the three karmas into the three virtues. The three karmas are like categories of karma. So the first of these categories is troubles coming from your desires, stemming from your selfish desires, or from your environment. such as having an enormous overdraft in the bank. This is the first category, earthly desires and troubles. And the second category is what they term accumulation of evil causes in your life. Now this, of course, is unlikely, probably, to apply if you're really practicing Buddhism. You're unlikely to make an evil cause, probably. But before you practiced, maybe you made evil causes. Certainly, probably, in other lives, you've made evil causes. And these, the effects of these are still built into your life and reveal themselves in this category of karma. So, there are many things that are reveal evil karma. But every one of us have it somewhere in our lives. And then finally, there's what they call general sufferings. General sufferings, like sickness, ill health, any other suffering which is not in the first two categories. And he says you can change all this by entering this land, by entering your room and chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, and going out and doing great activities and following what the Buddha says you should do. And you can change it into the three virtues. Those are the three virtues or attributes of the Buddha. That is the material or physical attribute, which means good fortune from your environment, and the spiritual attribute of the Buddha, which reveals itself in wisdom and life force and compassion. And thirdly, the very entity of the Buddha's state itself, in the depths of your life. The entity of your life becomes the entity of the Buddha's life. So the very fact of achieving through your practice Ninpo Ika means that you are taking into yourself or upon yourself the three attributes of the Buddha. So you remember, I've just said these are shown on the Gohonzon. When you say Nyoze So, Nyoze Sho, Nyoze Tai, Nyoze Riki, Nyoze San, Nyoze In, Nyoze En, Nyoze Ka, Nyoze Ho, Nyoze Hama Kukoto 3 times, this is because you desire those three attributes of the Buddha to be revealed in all the 10 aspects of your life. The 10 aspects, Nyoze So, Nyoze Sho, Nyoze Tai. Everything you do, every action you make, every reward you receive, all your power is the Buddha's. So this is true Ninpo Ika, and of course, ultimately enlightenment. Suffering man of Central India.
Right. A suffering man of Central India once visited the cold Munechi pond to cleanse himself of the heavy worries in his heart, and proclaimed that it satisfied all his desires just as the Shoryochi pond. Although this is different from the present circumstances, the principle is quite the same. Thus, Ryoju Sen of India is this Mount Munabur, or my location. Your last visit was a very long time ago. Try to come to see me at the earliest possible occasion. I'm awaiting you here. How splendid your sincerity is. In truth, how splendid.
Thank you. So the point of this little story he quotes here, which is based on Indian legend, is that these two ponds were legendary ponds. The Munechi pond was supposed to be a place where if you were suffering terribly from something, you could go into this pond, and because of the coolness of the waters, it could temporarily take away all your sufferings. And the other pond is a pond of crystal clear water, which represents the absolute happiness which you can attain in your life if you make the pure causes in order to achieve that. So this is really, in a sense, stating the Buddhist principle of achieving enlightenment through your earthly desires. Achieving enlightenment through your earthly desires. So what does this mean? This man went to this pond and he thought he could get rid of his sufferings for a little while he lay and basked in the water. But to his amazement, when he came out, he realized that his sufferings had gone. And he'd achieved enlightenment or indestructible happiness as if he'd been in this other pond, the Shoryochi. Now this is the same as in the Gosho when Nichiren Daishonin says, you can achieve Buddhahood without even seeking it. Even though you don't understand the meaning of Buddhahood, but you have a sincere desire to do what the Buddha says, chant Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, and tell other people about Buddhism, you will achieve enlightenment, even though you don't understand what it is, just by doing what the Buddha teaches. Because by doing what the Buddha teaches, you will then discover why. It's exactly the same when you start to practice, isn't it? When you start to practice, someone says to you, just chant Nam-myoho Renge Kyo and you'll get a fantastic benefit. So you probably don't believe a word they're saying, but for some reason you think, well, they're quite sensible people, these. Okay, I'll have a try. You don't believe it, but you do it, and then you get the proof, and then you begin to understand why. And this is the same at every phase of the practice of Buddhism. You do what the Buddha teaches, and then you'll understand why. So you practice as the Buddha says, and you will, without fail, achieve enlightenment. And what makes you practice? It is, in fact, your desires. You want to get a better job. You're so short of money and you're sick to death of not being able to pay your bills, so you chant like mad. This is your desires that are making you practice and leading you to Buddhahood. I remember the story I told some of you at church about this little girl, Mary, in Glasgow, who is a spastic. And doctors said it would be impossible for her to ever use her limbs or walk or anything. And she's like a helpless bundle. But about 3 years ago, she began to chant. And then she began to talk. And about 2 years ago, my wife said to her, what do you want to do when you're fine and much better? And she said, I want to help Mummy. But 1 year ago, I think it was, Kazo, sitting at the back there, Kazo said to her, what do you want to do when you're 20 years old? And she said, I want to be a dancer. So her desire to be a dancer is what is driving her on through all her difficulties to chant Nam-myoho Renge Kyo and to be carried to discussion meetings and even sometimes to give little experiences. Fantastic, isn't it? But she will achieve Buddhahood because of her earthly desires. This is the fantastic thing about Buddhism. It doesn't require you to be holy or cloistered or sitting on some mountain top. It requires you to live your daily life and to struggle to make it better. And through that struggle, the natural human desire to make your life better and to help other people, you achieve Buddhahood. So I think that's covered everything in the lecture. Thank you very much indeed. Do you want to get home, or do we want questions? Yeah, okay.
Mr. Coulson said he's got a few minutes more, and would you like to go home, or would you like to ask some questions? Anybody got any questions on this Kosho? Does it have to be on this?
Yeah,
First on this Kosho.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
What is the relationship
Phil,
between the...
could you stand up so everyone can hear your question?
I think looking at the three karmas, it seems that the troubles from desires can be connected with the accumulation of evil causes and so can the general sufferings. Are they all sort of interrelated?
The three karmas, yes, of course. They're totally mixed up in your life. This is just a way of describing karma, dividing it into those three categories. But in fact, of course, every minute of your life, you're accumulating causes and the effects of those causes. So it's a complete mix-up in your life. Does that answer it, Bill?
I think so. So is there a relationship, say, between troubles from desires and sickness?
Yes, of course there is. But I think what matters is that some of it is heavy and some of it is light. So obviously, evil karma, where you've made evil causes, is probably extremely heavy and needs that much more effort to overcome. But those categories are merely a way to explain it. It's a mix-up. Depends on the causes you've made. Yeah, Rob.
You explained about the fundamental principle of Esho-Kuni and how we actually, our surroundings change,
Yeah.
we change.
Yeah.
But I can never understand why Nichiren's life was so incredibly poor. I mean, in his last year or so of his life, he wrote this Gosho from a hovel. And I can never understand, if it's going to work for us, why didn't it work for him?
I see, yeah. Well, it's a very good question. But the answer is that he couldn't have taught us unless he had shown his suffering. Shakyamuni Buddha was born wealthy. You know, he was a prince, but he lived in feudal times where people could relate to rulers. They were born always expecting to be ruled by a king or a prince or somebody. So they were perfectly prepared, even in their terrible conditions, to listen to Shakyamuni Buddha, although he was a prince living in entirely and had lived in entirely different upbringing to theirs. But in this age, Nichiren Daishonin was dealing with everyone, the people who were really suffering. And he was born into a very poor family, and he led a very poor boyhood, and he suffered from the moment he declared Nam-myoho Renge Kyo onwards. So through this suffering, he was able to show people the spirit of Buddhism. So although he was in a hovel, he personally didn't desire anything else. All he desired was this indestructible happiness inside him. But of course that doesn't mean to say we shouldn't desire to live in a really nice house. Whatever we want we can get. And he taught that all the time. But he suffered the worst. And he explains this in many Goshos. He says that because I have practiced heretical religion, I've made terrible causes in my life. But of course, in fact, he's the original Buddha. But he made these causes in order to have these effects so that he could prove Buddhism to everybody. If he'd been a prince, it's unlikely people would have listened to him, living in luxury. But because he was suffering, they could follow and understand. Also, he said, because I am teaching the Lotus Sutra, and I'm the only person who's doing so in the whole world, I must expect to take on my shoulders all the sufferings and persecutions of the world. He was the only person challenging the negative forces with positive. So, of course, he drew onto him the worst possible of suffering. Does that answer it a bit, Rod?
I don't want to go on too much.
No.
It always depends on your life and automatically, really. Like if you did in fact change, then automatically, because of this thing that shows Burmese, then your surroundings would naturally change. And whether in fact your desire meant that you wanted a big wasn't the point. The fact is that because you changed, your environment
I see. But it,
I can understand what you mean.
yeah, you see, what concerned Nichiren Daishonin, in fact, was not material things. His great concerns was other human beings. So really all he was interested, personally, was to change the lives of other human beings to something better and greater. And by making their visits to him at Mount Minobu, and by his teachings, and by their contact with him, he was able to actually change all these people's lives, you see. So that was his desire. But of course, we're all human beings and we're each individual. So we each have different missions and different desires. So one person can really work for Kosen Rufu by writing great books, say, and by mixing with people who are other writers in that field of society. And there are other people who can do Kosen Rufu, perhaps by the fact that they can show their material good fortune. People say, my, you know, this person's got all this from practicing Buddhism. Everyone has a different mission. Okay? Fine. Yeah, one more. Yeah.
One point you described karma as being selfish desires which come from your ego, and then later on you said that you can achieve Buddhahood through your struggle to achieve your earthly desires. Selfish desires and the good things that you get from achieving desires. Children aren't selfish.
They are, that's right. But it's still, you follow the chain of your karma through your earthly desires, okay? But it's your struggle, having learnt or heard about the practice of Buddhism, it's your struggle to lead a creative life, which leads you, a worthwhile life, put it that way, which leads you eventually to enlightenment. So, of course, originally, your earthly desires or your karma may be pulling you down a certain direction, but through the practice of Buddhism, you begin to see your life. And you begin to see that that desire is taking you the wrong way. So you struggle to overcome that, not to be pulled that way. And that struggle is what leads you to enlightenment. So when you first begin to practice, you chant for all sorts of things, quite reasonably, you know. You may, anything. You chant to get a good job, or you chant to get a nice girlfriend, whatever it is. And you get it. But then you continue to practice, and your vision like widens, doesn't it? You begin to see yourself and to see your life. And you begin to see that those things that before so absorbed you and took your attention were in fact only giving you very shallow happiness, if any happiness at all. So the next time you feel that pull, you chant like mad, not to let it pull you. That's one, example. On the other hand, like that girl Mary, she had a desire, to be a dancer. So that desire to be physically strong and healthy was what was making her chant and would lead her to Buddhahood. So this reaction or action can happen for many different reasons. But whichever way, from the moment you first chant for a nice girlfriend, you're on the path to enlightenment. Do you see what I mean? Do you? Yeah. Yeah. One more, I think. Whose hand was first? Okay, about the back. Yes, Gobi?
I can't understand quite what it means by my heart is good. They start saying, my heart is well and good in sense of nirvana. Then you've got one of the verses where it suits as well. I don't understand why he used such difficult words. And is there simple ones? And if there are, is there are?
Can everyone hear that?
Do you understand my question?
Yes, I could. Does everybody else understand it? Why does he use such a complicated way of explaining it? But in these cases, he's referring to the sort of explanations that were given in the teachings of Shakyamuni. So I think you didn't come in until a little later, but I did explain earlier that Nichiren Daishonin uses some of these rather remote-sounding ways, terms and phrases and ways of explaining things. Sometimes it's because they refer to legends, which every child in Japan in those days knew. But other times he is doing this in order to relate his teachings to the teachings of Shakyamuni, and to show that the flow of Buddhism was pure and clear from Shakyamuni through to himself. So these terms, like the Buddha's enter nirvana, and my tongue is where they turn the wheel of the teachings, these are all references to early Buddhism. Okay? So even though it's very difficult for you to understand, you must remember that this was being taught in Japan 700 years ago, when there were many, many, many different Buddhist sects following the earlier teachings. So every child would probably have gone to a temple of one of the sects of early Buddhism at regular intervals as part of his family routine. So nirvana and the wheel of the teachings and all that, clearly they would have known what he was referring to. But I agree, it does make it difficult for us. Sorry, I think Nigel is the last, I'm afraid.
It's funny, you and I had the same Gosho phrase in mind. I put my hand up to ask you about the same phrase. I want to ask you if we could look at this as a Nichiren saying, in fact, that he was the original Buddha.
Yes, in a sense.
I inherited from Shakyamuni Buddha the Buddha, and my heart is and my tongue is the my throat is the way in which they emerge into this world. Really, that's saying.
It is, yes.
The original.
That's right. It is really. He is saying that he inherited the teachings from Shakyamuni Buddha at the treasure tower ceremony which I was talking about. But for our own purposes, it means when we give birth to some teaching on Buddhism. We are doing the same thing. And the benefits of all the Buddhas will come to us. So really, in these Gosho, of course it's good to understand every word, but really what matters is the spirit related to our own practice and activities. It's not like academic study, is it? Studying the Gosho. Or it shouldn't be. Nichiren Daishonin wrote the Gosho to convey his spirit to his followers. So we should read it in the same way. Not academically, but with our lives, to really feel what he meant concerned with our lives and our activities. This is the point of the Gosho. Okay? Well, thank you very much indeed for listening. Take care. Many thanks. Thank you very much. Many thanks. Thank you very much.